What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with a brand new Netflix series review, and today we'll be diving into the new fantasy series by the name of Shadow and Bone, which will be premiering today on Netflix, April 23rd. Now, I spent the last few days diving into this series that I knew nothing about, and I'm so excited to let you all know my thoughts in this review. But before we dive into it, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. If you're new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hit that notification bell. That way you can get the alert from when I drop new reviews. It will mean the world to me if you all can like and share this review of Shadow and Bone. I have a lot to say about this series and I want to discuss it with you all. So make sure you're sharing this video, liking this video, and more importantly, comment your thoughts in the comment section. Have you read the book? Once you've seen the show, which one did you prefer more, the series or the books? Are you excited for season 2? Who were your favorite characters, your least favorite characters? Let's discuss it all in the comments below. So just a quick little breakdown. I do these with all my Netflix series reviews and a lot of my series reviews in general. I like to break these down into two different sections. So the first half of this video is for those that haven't spent the last 24 hours watching the show like I did in the last few days, watching it and diving into it. But if you haven't seen the show yet, you're kind of on the fence, you don't know what it's about, I'm going to spend the first half, no spoilers, just my pros, my cons, breaking down the magic and the worlds and the characters and just my general thoughts on if you should watch the show. That's the first half. The second half is more of the breakdown, the ending explained, kind of my hopes for a season 2, and kind of really diving deeper into the series. So that will be more of a spoiler discussion. So again, there will be time codes in the description, different chapters, so you know what discussions I'll be talking about, when to pop in, when to pop out. And of course, once you've seen the entire series, you can watch this entire review in its entirety. So with that being said, if you were like me and never heard of Shadow and Bone, haven't read the books, and you're just like, okay, I like fantasy, I like, what I seen from the trailer, is it worth checking out? What is it about? Who created it? Let me fill you all in. Shadow and Bone tells the story of dark forces conspiring against orphan Alina when she unleashes extraordinary power that can change the fate of her war-torn world. The show was developed by Heisserer and based on the novel Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows. Now, this first season consisted of 8 episodes, which range between 52 and 58 minutes long. Alright, so let's kick off this spoiler-free portion of this review talking about my expectations going into the show. Now again, I haven't read the novels. I've never even heard of Shadow and Bone until I saw the trailer a couple months ago, and it was a couple things that sold me on watching this show. Number one, the trailer did a good job of setting the tone, letting me kind of into this world of fantasy and creatures and magic. So I was really intrigued by the trailer. And then when I think about Netflix and fantasy genre projects in the last few years, I think of a show like The Witcher. Great world building, politics, creatures, blood, guts, great characters. And then there was a show last summer by the name of Curse, which had the opposite of everything that The Witcher had. The characters were underwhelming, the story was the world building was lacking. So for someone that hasn't read the books, what was Shadow and Bone going to be? More like The Witcher or more like Cursed? Well, let's start off talking about the showrunner, Heisserer, who has a very interesting filmography for the movies he's written in the last 10 years. Whether he's a co-writer or the main writer, I think of projects like A Nightmare on Elm Street, Lights Out, Final Destination 5. He's written, Bird Box for Netflix. He also wrote the action film, the sci-fi action film from Vin Diesel, Bloodshot. So as you can see, Eric has some really interesting horror films and then some not so good horror sci-fi films, but it's the one project, ladies and gentlemen, that always get me excited to see Eric's name attached to anything. That's 2016 sci-fi drama directed by my favorite director, Denis Villeneuve's Arrival. So listen, Eric, you can do your Bird Boxes, you can do your Nightmare on Elm Street, prequels, sequels, reboots, but it's Arrival that gets me excited about him being the writer of this show, because what can Eric do with fantasy? And when it comes to my love for fantasy, Game of Thrones, The Witcher, Lord of the Rings, it's the world and the characters within the world. And this show has some amazing world building and even more better characters. So starting off with this world, again, for someone that hasn't read the novel, they refer to this universe as the Grishaverse, which is a world filled with rich magical abilities for people to have. There's the fantasy elements, there's the gritty nature of the politics in this world, but there's also the realistic conflict that lies within this Grisha universe. Now, when I look at these different countries, there's the main country that we follow in this story, which is split up between, you have the Rashka, which is kind of like Russia, and they have the capital, which is like Moscow. Then you have other countries surrounding this main country, which reminded me of countries like America, China, China, Ireland, Netherlands, the world that they kind of create in the politics and how people are fearful of the people that have Grisha, that have these magical abilities. This show really reminded me a lot of X-Men, and I'll talk about those reasons a little bit later, but seeing this world split up and seeing how the politics works within this world and seeing this fold which splits everyone up. And this fold, it has some things, it has some magic, it has some demons, it has some monsters within that world. So I really love the world that was established in this show, which, speaking of Gretchen, speaking of magic, it's so awesome. I'm not going to get into all the details, but just kind of breaking down the different abilities and different people that we meet within the show in regards to the set of powers they have. So you have some people that have abilities to give you life or take away life, and those people are referred to as the heart renderers or the life healers, and they wear red in this show, which again symbolizes death, or it can symbolize hope and symbolize giving someone life. And those characters are the first line of defense for the Grisha army. They have really great set abilities. Again, they can save your life, they can take away your life. Seeing those characters in this universe was fantastic. Then you think of the characters that wear blue in the show, which are referred to the Infernes, as well as the Tide Makers. Now, the Infernes are the people that have fire abilities, they can manipulate fire, and then you have the Tide Makers who can manipulate water and movement and things of that nature. So they are the people that wear blue in the show, which I thought were really fascinating characters. And then you have characters that can manipulate objects, solid objects, wood, metal, you name it. Very fascinating characters. They wear purple in the show. So again, it's all of the combination of the world, the politics, the magic, the Grisha, the power abilities. But then last but not least, you have the mythical creatures. You have the people that are just kind of rare beings in the Grisha universe, and that is the summoners. Now, these people can do one of two things. You have someone that can manipulate and take advantage of darkness, and then you have someone that can manipulate light. So the good versus evil, the dark side versus the light side. So again, the world that's created in the Grishaverse was just so rich, so fascinating, and some of my favorite elements about this fantasy show, which brings me to the best part of the show, which were the characters. And I'm so happy to say that, because when you dive into a fantasy world like a Game of Thrones, it's the House of Stark, it's the Lannisters, it's the Game of Thrones type of stuff that you just care for these characters and you're going on this adventure with these characters. And that's what I loved about this show. Starting off with our lead character, Alina, who is played by Jessie May Lee. Now, this is my first time being exposed to Jessie, and a lot of these actors were brand new to me, except for one character who we'll talk about here in a second. But Jessie as Alina was so fantastic. She was your hero of the show. You cared for her, or at least I did. She gave you everything in this role, from being happy to being a hero to having conflict to having a love interest to having a dark side at times. She was fantastic. Alina is the orphan of the show who is working for the First Army in Rashka, and she has this adventure that she goes on where she is saving her best friend, potential love interest in the show. Something happens where they get split up, and she starts to develop that she is one of the summoners, one of the rare beings on Earth that can summon light. And that isn't a spoiler because that is in the trailer. And I'm telling you all, again, just seeing her journey from coming from an orphan to going to the capital, to learning her abilities, to falling in love, to fighting against some evil beings. I loved Alina. I love Jessie in this role, and I can't wait to see what they do with this character if we inevitably get a season 2, which brings me to, if there's a light side, well, there has to be a dark side. And that dark side was led by Ben Barnes, who plays General Kirigan, who is the leader of the Grisha army. Now, Ben Barnes is the one actor I was referring to who I knew his work prior to going into the show, and he loves fantasy, right? Whether it be Stardust, Chronicles of Narnia, he's a great hero. He can play a villain, whether it be the Punisher. I think he's a fantastic actor, and he was, I think of a word when I think of Ben Barnes in this show in particular as General Kirigan: consistency. He has a lot of layers. He's a complex character. He has a interesting backstory with his character. For those that read the novel probably know where his backstory leads, but he was just so fascinating. Again, he is a powerful, mysterious character who, again, as Alina can summon the light, he can summon the dark. He is someone that has a very mysterious past and someone that I was just incredibly fascinated with. And again, Ben Barnes was incredible in this show, which brings me to a particular potential love triangle. I mentioned that we have Alina, who comes from an orphanage, and she has a best friend by the name of Mel, who is played by Archie Reno. And again, Mel is the best friend who grew up with Alina, who cares for Alina very deeply, who wants to protect her. He goes through it, man. He is in the Second Army. He is someone that he has his own subplot that he's involved with. He's a good person that works within the army. He is a good tracker. He has a lot of good abilities, but he's also stubborn at times. So I really enjoyed the Mel character. And again, when you see Alina mixed in with General Kirigan, mixed in with Mel, and the little love triangle that kind of takes place in the show, is a really interesting story there. But then my favorite set of characters go by the name of the Crows, led by Kez, who is played by Freddie Carter. He is someone that is a criminal mastermind. He knows all the secrets, who lies in the shadow. He wants to do the job. He doesn't care if it's a good job or a bad job. If he's killing someone or saving someone, as long as you pay him the money, he's going to get the job done. And his crew was easily the best part. There's a lot of different moving pieces in the show, and he has his own subplot with his group of people that I'll talk about here in a bit, but he was so great. Freddie Carter, someone else who I'm not familiar with, but I really enjoyed his character. Again, he's a criminal mastermind, and his crew, the Crows, were the best element of the show, which brings me to my favorite character in the show. That is Inej, played by Amita Suman. She was so badass. She is my favorite character in the show. I wish that we get a spinoff with that character. She's like an Assassin's Creed. She's an assassin, man. She lies within the shadows. She has incredible skills in hand-to-hand combat. She is the master spy. She has her knives. She has her daggers. She was so awesome, guys. Like, literally, I just loved every time she was on screen. I love when she had her dynamic with the Crows, but her individually and her story, her beliefs, her moral compass, the best character in the entire show, which brings me to my second favorite character on the show, who's also a part of the Crows, and that is Jesper, who is the sharpshooter of the group. He's also the cocky guy. He's the comic relief. And when it comes to fantasy projects, when you have the comedic person or the funny person or the person that brings levity to some of the more darker moments, it can go one or two ways, and it went the best way for this character, Jesper, who is played by Kit Young. I thought he was phenomenal in the role. Again, he was charismatic. He was cocky. He was the action guy. He was the sharpshooter with his two guns, his two pistols. I thought that character was fantastic. And again, I cannot iterate it enough. The Crows, Kez, Inej, as well as who we get with the sharpshooter in his group, Jesper, those group of people were my favorite subplots. They were my favorite characters, and I love them. And again, give me a spinoff with the Crows, and I'll be watching it. So there were some other characters that we'll talk a little bit about later in regards to supporting cast, like Nina and some other characters. But all in all, our main set of characters, our main set of storylines were so intriguing, so epic, and just so well thought out. I really enjoyed our main characters, which brings me to my other positives about the show. The production. Now, going into the composer of this show, Joseph Trapanese, I thought he did such a fantastic job of bringing in the fantasy elements, the epic nature to this story, which really kind of brings everything together, as well as the costuming, the hair and makeup. You have the visual effects. I don't know if the show was affected by COVID, if it was pushed back, but if it was, I felt like they spent all that time really beefing up the visual effects. The VFX were flawless to me in the show. And then just the story, without giving away too much, just the stuff that we see Alina go through in the Capitol, and Mel trying to get to her with the General Kirigan. We have the Crows, and then you have Nina's story that we'll talk about here in a bit, and just the politics, the world building. It was just all the stuff that they were able to bring into this 8-episode, hour-ish type of episodes. It was just so well done, which brings me to my favorite episode, which was episode 5, which was titled Show Me Who You Are. That episode had a major reveal. It had stakes, it had action, it had a heist, and it was just so well written. So, favorite episode, favorite characters, what I loved about the show, which brings me into my criticism with the show, which I talked about my favorite episode. Well, I have my least favorite episode, starting off with my cons. Episode 6, now none of the episodes were terrible, but episode 6 was really an episode that it followed my favorite episode, in which it was split into 2 stories. And I won't get into the storylines, but let's just say I wasn't a fan of one of the stories because it involved a particular set of characters that I'll talk about here in a bit. But there's a reunion that takes place in episode 6, which I found to be very underwhelming. But I talked about the other half of the story, and I mentioned some supporting characters a little bit earlier that just didn't work for me. And those characters, for example, that I just found to be very underwhelming were Inej, Zoya, Bagra, and then what I think to be the weakest part of this show, the weakest characters, the most underdeveloped, most underwhelming characters, Nina and Matthias. I was not a fan of those characters. I knew what they were trying to do with the characters. I mentioned Game of Thrones earlier, and I think of Jaime Lannister and Brienne's story, how they were complete opposites, and you kind of get that with Nina and Matthias, Nina is a witch. She is someone that is the heart renderer. She's a healer as well as someone that can take away someone's life. And we have Matthias, who is a witch hunter. So obviously they're going to butt heads, and you see them on their kind of subplot. And again, I don't want to dive into the spoilers, but whenever we cut to Nina and Matthias, that was the weakest elements to me, the most underdeveloped. We spent a lot of time with them in episode 6 and mostly in the second half of the show. And when we see their conclusion, it was lackluster. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. I'll talk about them more in the spoiler half of the review. But again, they were my least favorite part of the show. But then the other element in the show that was it was a little bit of me and then also a little bit of the show regarding with this story is so ambitious. It's so large in scale. There's a lot of moving pieces. And maybe I should have done some research prior to watching the show. But there's a lot going on, and sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. Someone, like I had mentioned, I didn't know anything about The Witcher, and it took me about 3 episodes to really kind of, okay, who is this character? What are they able to do? Same with Game of Thrones. It took me like a whole season to finally figure out who all the houses were. And in this show, it took me about 2 or 3 episodes, if I'm being honest, to figure out, okay, who is this person? What side are they on? Are they a Grisha? Are they a human? Are they part of the Rashka? Are they part of the first army, the second army? You know, it's so many things going on. I thought the show did a good job of laying everything out, but I'm the type of guy that says, hey, they could have probably maybe cut an episode or 2. They probably, there was a filler episode here and there. But I honestly thought that this show could have benefited from maybe 9 or 10 episodes to really flesh out the world, because there's some episodes that just, again, Grisha, Rashka, we have all these moving pieces that it can be a bit overwhelming. So I will warn you all that are new to this IP like me that maybe, do some research and maybe just really kind of pay attention to what's going on, especially in those first 2 episodes. But nonetheless, my last criticism here is, without giving away the people who die, when there are characters that do meet their demise, I found those emotional moments to not land for me personally. And also, last but not least, this show has some really good action, but not enough action. I felt like it could have used some more action set pieces. It could have used some more creatures, especially in the fold, especially in the woods, in the mythical creatures that we get there. I wish there was more of the fantasy creatures and more of the action in this show. And who knows, that might be more of what season 2 has to offer. So overall, minus some of the supporting characters, Nina and Matthias, minus feeling a bit lost at points in the story, this series was epic. This series was ambitious. It was adventurous. There's so much great world building, so many great characters, and I cannot wait for a season 2. I can't wait till we get the announcement. Hopefully it comes out within the next year, because I will be watching it. I highly recommend you all give the show a watch, whether you're a book reader, which again, in the comments, if you read the book, let me know which one was better, the book or the series. How did the show adapt the books, as well as your favorite characters, least favorite characters, story plots, and what you will hope to see in a season 2. Let me know that in the comments. But again, if you love the books, I think you'll enjoy this show. And if you're a fantasy lover, you're going to have a good time. So that's my non-spoiler portion of the video, diving into the spoiler half, just kind of breaking it down a little bit in regards to how it all ended and how it all wrapped up, and what I would hope to see in a season 2, starting off with the big moment, the big character, the bad guy of the show, played by Ben Barnes, and that is General Kirigan. Now, he is someone that we learn within this show that he is centuries years old. He was the one that created the fold. We see why he created the fold, which makes him so much more layered and so much more complex when we see that. I don't know if it was a wife, if he had kids with her, but it was someone he cared for when she died on the hands of the humans. And just seeing his motives, learning who his mother was and all that stuff. But we see at the end of the episode, we assume that the General Alexander has been killed by one of the creatures in the fold. But no, you can't kill off Ben Barnes. He's too much of a rich character. We see him walking out of the fold, telling the fold to follow him, which I would imagine in season 2 it'll pick up right after those events. But he's all scratched up, which again, Ben Barnes, it reminded me so much of the Punisher. He's always looking different from one season to the next. But seeing his journey, I would imagine we're going to get more of his story. We're going to really get a better understanding of, again, I compared this to X-Men and the mutants and him protecting his own kind, which you get that. You see where he's coming from, but it's the way he's going about doing it, in taking the stag and taking Alina's powers and controlling the light, but also controlling the darkness. So I can't wait to see what this show has up to offer for that particular character, Alexander, and what other things he can do now that he has kind of been resurrected and really kind of taken on that villainous role in the season 2. But I really enjoyed Ben Barnes' portrayal. Going into Alina. Now, we know she has the abilities. The stag chose her to have those abilities and the antlers inside of her and controlling the light. And her journey was really interesting, right? In regards to her training, learning how to manipulate and summon the light. And I really want to see more of that in season 2. I felt like they did a good job of laying the groundwork of how she was able to establish her powers, being that she learned how to use the light and manipulate the light by, Alexander's mom. But I want to see her train more, really harnessing the light, really tuning in into her powers and controlling and manipulating her powers, and also getting a little bit more hand-to-hand combat. But Alina, I loved her story. I want to see her develop more of that stag power and really kind of take on her journey of taking on the fold and destroying the fold. But we see that her and Mal are now free. They are on the road. She is a nobody, essentially, right? But she's also not known upon as, the Grisha. She's going to be undercover. So seeing them fall in love, really telling their feelings about one another, but also see who they're going to attach themselves to, see who they're going to run into on this road as we see them on the boat together. And then last but not least, we see the destruction of, if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Navaktaverse, if I'm not mistaken, with the general who wants to take out the Grisha. I don't think that general's dead. I think he will be back. I think he'll be madder than ever, wants to take out the Grisha. So I don't think that we learned that most of that city was taken out, but I think the main players will still be alive. But then we have the capturing of Nina and her lover Matthias, who, again, as I mentioned in my non-spoiler portion, I was not a fan of their storyline. We'll see if they can redeem themselves, because I would imagine, I haven't read the books, but again, for the book readers out there, I think that Nina's a pivotal character. I think that's why the show focused so much of the second half on her relationship with the witch hunter. I hope that they get a better fleshed out story. I hope they're not as underwhelming. And again, that's just my opinion. Some people might love their love story. I just found it to be very underwhelming. And I found like it was more so Matthias. I thought that actor, if I'm being honest, wasn't that great. I thought Nina was energetic. She was fun. And her abilities, obviously, as being the heart renderer and the healer was cool. But their chemistry needs to get better in season 2 and see what happens with him being, captured as a slave and him maybe being a captive for 1 or 2 years. We'll see how that plays out. But again, Nina and Matthias, if we're going to spend time with them next year, give them more stuff to do and more fleshed out things to do. So again, give me a season 2 next year, Netflix. I love this show. I think they have a hit on their hands. I can't wait to talk more about the show with you all in the comments. Again, if you're watching the spoiler half of this, let me know your thoughts, your pros, your cons, your theories for season 2, what worked, what didn't work for you, as well as let's talk about it all in the comments. Again, thank you all for watching this review. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video, share the video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of this video. I had so much to say about it because I really enjoyed the show, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well. But make sure, again, that you like the video and you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell. That way you don't miss any more other content. Hope you all are staying safe. We'll see you in the next video.